Oh, that's too high. Good morning. So as you can see, and as I've mentioned already in other videos, I'm moving, like imminently moving, but I have a few days still at home in which I have a little bit of work to do, a little bit of last minute packing to do and organising to do, but in which I also, top priority, need to finish all of the books I'm like in the middle of reading. Oh, I was in such a reading slump, sort of in March in particular, where I was starting a bunch of books, couldn't settle on a book. I feel like I'm out of that slump now. I've read some fantastic books since that I absolutely loved, and that's really like gotten my reading back up to speed. But like I said, I was in this phase of starting like a ton of things, which were great, like all of them I was enjoying, but you know, just for one reason or another, slump. And essentially, I just kind of want to get them read before I move into my new house. There's something about like a big change, moving house, that kind of thing, where I'd like to be able to start fresh. I'd like these books to go in the bookcases and to start some new books and not take that reading over to my new home, especially since I started some of them a little while ago. So yeah, I thought, let's just turn this into a super chill, traditional, casual reading vlog where I talk about the books that I'm reading, try and finish them, and then also maybe just share a little bit of like the packing, work situation, etc. You know, just see what happens really. But there are 5 books in particular that I'm going to be focusing on in this video, so let's have a look at them, shall we? The first one I'm actually reading with my partner Chris, so I can't read it when I'm by myself, but we're about halfway through it and it's very short, so I have no doubt that we will get this finished this weekend, which is our last weekend before we move, and that is lot number 249 by Arthur Conan Doyle. Yes, the author of Sherlock Holmes. This is not a Sherlock Holmes story though. This is a short story of about 50 pages from the Penguin Little Black Classics range, which is actually one of, if not the first fictionalized account of a mummy that sort of rises from the dead and has this almost like zombie-like being and goes out and is potentially a danger to society. Like, it's the first kind of mummy horror story, if that makes sense. Obviously it's not the first mummy, but it's the first like mummy horror story. So yeah, we're really enjoying it. I love Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's writing. It's like a comfort space for me, so we'll probably finish that in the next few days. And also reading one of my favourite magazines. This is a back issue, which I hadn't got into because I sort of picked up a few at once when I first started getting into the magazine, and I missed this one out for some reason when I was reading through them, and it's volume 6, the Summoning issue. So this is Hellebore, if you can't see from the title, which is a magazine that focuses in on sort of like archaeology in Britain and Ireland, history, literature, mythology, folklore in Britain and Ireland. So like the focus is on geographically Britain and Ireland, although sometimes obviously touches on things further afield when it's linked into that. But yeah, a bit of history, a bit of archaeology, a bit of literature, a bit of mythology, a bit of folklore, and I love it. So I think I've got 2 or 3 articles left in this one to read. Then we have a YA horror novel. This is I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast is Me by Jameson Shea, which I think I'm actually only about 50 pages in, but like at 50 pages, I'm very much at the point in the book where I'm like hooked and intrigued now, and I want to know what happens, so I don't want it to kind of fall behind in my reading and to get distracted from it. I want to like carry on reading, keep going, and like fully immerse myself in it. I hope that makes sense. But so far from this one, I'm really impressed by the writing. I think it's really atmospheric, and it's about a young prima ballerina, you know, like a young upcoming ballerina star who's just got like sort of her first big role, but it's a cutthroat world of ballet, and she's kind of desperate to succeed. So I understand that maybe things are going to get a little bit darker, a little bit maybe magical, as maybe some, you know, like dark powers, monsters and magic come into play in the cutthroat world of ballet, as I said. Although obviously based on the title of this one, I don't necessarily think our protagonist is going to be a hero, but I think they're going to be a really interesting character, so I'm excited about that and see what happens next. We then have a non-fiction book which I'm a little over halfway through, and this is The Fires of Lust, Sex in the Middle Ages by Catherine Harvey. The title of this one's pretty self-explanatory. It's a non-fiction book about attitudes to, understanding of, ideas about the reality of sex in the Middle Ages, particularly with a focus on Europe and really just anywhere that is heavily Christian, because a lot of it's seen through the eyes of the church and how the church influences the laws and attitudes and relationships with sex, etc. So I have been enjoying learning from this. It's a little bit on the denser side in terms of like, it is an academic book with a lot of information, but I still think it's really, really interesting. It's managed to cover a lot. Not only is it just interesting from the perspective of medieval history, but as an ancient historian I always find books like this a little bit interesting, because I can kind of start to see how things have changed given the influence of Christianity and just other aspects of society since antiquity, because sex in antiquity is one of my specialities. So yeah, I'm enjoying this. I'm going to keep reading it. And then lastly, I actually have an audiobook, which I only have an hour left in, so should not be a problem. In fact, I'd like to finish it today. And that is The Hacienda, which is a historical horror novel set in the sort of aftermath of the Civil War in Mexico, which I have to say is a historical period I've never read a novel set in. So it's even just interesting from the perspective of getting that historical detail. And I've really been enjoying that. It's a very like rich setting. It feels very it feels like you are there, and it feels like I'm learning a lot whilst not being bogged down by information. So I'm really enjoying that about it. Obviously I'm really near the end, so I'm just generally really enjoying this book, I have to say. But it's about a woman who marries into a wealthy family and goes to her husband's house out in the countryside, and when she gets there, is there ghosts? Is there some dark possession? Is there magic? Is there witchcraft? What is going on? I can't say nothing because obviously I don't want to spoil it. But it's the book that we've been reading for my Patreon book club over on Discord. It's really nice being able to discuss these books with people, and I'm excited to start our next read. So yeah, that actually needs to get finished generally by the end of this month, because we're starting our next book in May. But regardless, I'm really near the end. So yeah, I feel like that was a little bit rambly, but those are all the books I'm currently reading. Don't be fooled by the boxes behind me. This is but a small fraction of everything that needs to get moved. But yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of packing, I'm going to do a little bit of reading, I'm even going to do a little bit of work over the next few days, and I'll take you along with me and let you know how I get on with everything. So between packing and my little walk earlier, I have officially finished the first book of this vlog. I finished listening to the audiobook of The Hacienda. I mean, I pretty much said at the beginning of this video that I thought that would be the first one I finished, since I only had an hour left and it was an audiobook, and I had some stuff to do today which involved just having an audiobook on in the background. So yeah, take one done. I think next to be finished will probably be Hellebore, since I've read one more article, so I only have 1 or 2 left now. But I enjoyed The Hacienda. I feel like it's a real classic gothic. Like, if you like gothic novels, whether you like gothic novels from like the original gothic novel era, or you like modern takes on the gothic, I think you'll really enjoy this. It's definitely a really atmospheric modern take on the gothic novel, which still has that historical setting, which I really enjoyed. Like I said, I felt the detail was really rich and interesting. I don't want to give anything away, obviously. This is not like a spoilery vlog, but like I'm reeling a little bit. Like I'm processing some stuff, and that's all I can say if you haven't read the book. But I enjoyed reading it, and I'll definitely check out more by that author, Isabel Canis. I just looked it up, and she actually had another book come out at the end of last year, which was a vampire western, also set in 19th century Mexico. So yeah, I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for that and maybe read that in the future. So yeah, like, it was a good read. I'm glad we read it for my Patreon book club. I'm glad that's the one that won the poll. And actually the audiobook, just to mention as well, was excellent. It's currently on Everand, which I use. It used to be called Scribd. So if you're looking for it somewhere, it is there. But yeah, I can't say anything else because I cannot spoil the novel. Good, historical, gothic, with some intense and heart-wrenching moments. This is definitely the worst week to be filming a vlog because there's a lot of noise on the street at the minute, so I'm just filming in random spots hoping that it's not too noisy. But I finished Hellebore as promised, and I enjoyed it as always. The thing I love about Hellebore is not only do I enjoy reading the articles themselves, I often find more things that I want to investigate, learn about, people to follow, things to read from the articles. Like, it's a really great jumping off point for new interests and like new art forms and new bits of history or new like sort of niches. But just to sort of contextualise, I think there were sort of 3 articles that stood out to me in this volume in particular. The first of which I actually mentioned in my last book haul because it caused me to buy a book, and the article itself was called Spinster Satanism. So immediately I was like, oh, curious, what is this about? And it was a discussion of a book that came out in the 1920s by Sylvia Townsend Warner called Lolly Willowes. And it's about a woman in the 1920s who decides to leave behind the city, sort of commit to spinsterhood, become a witch in the countryside and meet Satan, who is a woman. And it's sort of about like the pressures on women and sexism, particularly pertaining to the age it's set in. And I think Satan is a sort of female liberator character, which sounds really interesting. So I found the discussion of that book really interesting, and naturally I then had to go pick up the book. I also enjoyed the first article in this issue, which was about sort of like cursed books, kind of like the trope, shall we say. I mean, the kind of image of the cursed book. The article itself was called Hell is Other Readers by Christine Ferguson, recounts stories of mysterious books and arcane manuscripts reflecting the anxieties they embody, which made me think of like all the different types of media I've seen which kind of continues this trope. In particular, I was thinking about a short, like just not a short film, but like a one-off in an anthology show by Guillermo del Toro called Cabinet of Curiosities, where there's an episode that the protagonist discovers like a arcane manuscript in a storage unit. So it was making me think about that, and then actually kind of, yeah, all the times I've seen that before, and now I think I'm going to be more aware of it in the future, and I think it's really interesting. And then there was also just like a little profile and bit of history on a house in Scotland called Boleskine House, in the article The House of the Great Beast, which has had like a lot of different legends around it, but it was once occupied by Aleister Crowley, which is obviously interesting in and of itself. And I hadn't heard of this house before, and now I kind of want to go visit it. I'm really intrigued. I kind of want to visit it, but I also kind of don't. Like, I'm kind of terrified of it, but it was really interesting to read about it. So those are the 3 sort of standout articles for me, like a little bit on history and architecture, a little bit about magical imagery and media, and a little bit about one specific book that I'm now intending to read. In fact, once I've finished all the books in this video, that's the next book I want to pick up, is Lolly Willowes in particular, and read it for myself. So yeah, that's how I'm getting on, and I'll catch up with you later. I just thought I'd do a little reading update. I feel so dishevelled. I am so exhausted actually, so sorry if I'm not super on it in this clip, but you know, I've been reading a little bit more of The Fires of Lust, and just thought I'd talk about something in particular that like I guess I have a lot of experience with at this point, having, you know, written a whole PhD that took, 6 or 7 years worth of research on sex. The thing about books like this, which is really interesting, really well researched, really detailed, so much information presented in one place, and like quite cohesively, is that a book about sex is oftentimes also a book about trauma and assault and power and discrimination. And I just in particular read the chapter which was about defying sexual norms. So that one particularly dealt with same-sex couples and same-sex sex. And I just think it's worth saying that, like, even as somebody who is a historian with a speciality in sex and the history of sex and attitudes towards sex and sexual violence, I don't think it ever gets easier to read and learn about the horrors of these parts of society as well. I think it's important to understand them, and you can't really write a book about sex in general without talking about things like like homophobia. But as important as that history is, it can still be really hard to read about, and it just reminds me of some of the moments when I was studying my PhD where it all just got very overwhelming, particularly writing about sexual violence against women, especially as a woman with your own experiences that sort of come back up when you're reading and researching this stuff. As much as I would recommend this book, and I think it's a really well researched, really interesting book with a lot of information, it's okay if these things affect you when you're reading and learning about them. It's okay, and it doesn't make you less intelligent or intellectual, less academic to be affected by the difficult topics you're reading about. I think it's really important that those who write and research in these spaces acknowledge that, and like we talk about it. And I think that's really, really important. Otherwise we're all just going to like internalize it, and that's not good. So that was basically what I wanted to say. Hopefully not a negative note for this video, but just like a reflective one for a moment there. So yeah, so I'm going to put this down for tonight and read something a little bit more lighthearted before I go to sleep, or play a little bit on my Switch. But yeah. So I'm just doing a little bit of reading outside with my SPF on, of course. I'm getting a little bit of sunshine and vitamin D and, joy from reading. And I've just reached about 70 pages and I feed her to the beast, and the beast is me. And like, I feel like it's really, it's starting to grip me. Like, the beginning was beautifully written and interesting, but it was also kind of set up for the ballet and our character. And now I'm like, oh, what's going to happen? Where's this going? It's getting dark, it's getting creepy on a level beyond just, ballet is cutthroat. So I'm really enjoying that, and I think this is going to really animate me to read it even quicker. And I still love the way it's written. It's set in France, and it just has such a rich, gorgeous but also dark atmosphere that I love. So yeah, I just thought I'd give you that little update. Update time. So I'm only a few days away from moving now, and everything is utter chaos. But I have been reading in between that chaos, and the books, to the extent where I even finished another book. I finished reading lot number 249 by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle with my partner Chris. We were reading it out loud together and taking turns, and it's even packed. Like, that's where we're at. We read it, we packed it, it's gone. But I did enjoy it. I have like a very sort of long relationship with Arthur Conan Doyle's prose. I've been reading Sherlock Holmes since I was like 12, and I find them very comforting. I think he's an incredible writer. I love like the atmosphere he creates. I also love just reading the sort of turns of phrases that are different from our own, because obviously this book came out in either like, I think it was like the 1880s or the 1890s, and there was lines like there was one line in particular that really sticks in my mind, which was "You're white as cheese," which I've never heard before. Like, people say obviously, oh, you're as white as a sheet, you're as white as a ghost or something, like to indicate they're looking pale and frightened, but he said you're as white as cheese. I just love it. Never heard it before. I really enjoyed that. It is an old story though. In terms of plot, it's one of the first ever stories to portray a mummy coming to life and doing harm. So it's interesting in that perspective. Obviously, there's a ton of media since then that's done that. So it's not exactly my first time reading or watching something with that kind of storyline. We've probably all seen The Mummy. Yeah, like, so it's interesting to read the first version of that. Is it like the most terrifying thing? Certainly not. And then there is a lot of particularly fat phobia in this story. Like, the villain is very, very much a victim of fat phobia in this book, and that was kind of to read. But I am glad I finally got around to reading it, because I've been meaning to read it for years, having read all of his Sherlock Holmes stories. But that leaves me with 2 more books to finish, so let me inform you and update you on where I am with those. So I'm past 100 pages on I Feed Her to the Beast, and The Beast is Me by Jameson Shea. I love the title. I also love this cover. I don't know if I've said that already, but this is just beautiful. I am really enjoying this. It's getting creepier. Things are escalating. Again, the setting of France is so rich and detailed, but not like forced, like very in a natural way. And I'm loving that. And oh yeah, it's getting creepier by the page, so that's really fun and a really enjoyable read. And also like all the best horror sort of commentary on like real life issues like classism and racism and pressure in certain fields and careers and etc. etc. So yeah, really enjoying that. And then I'm almost finished The Fires of Lust. I think I've got like 30 or 40 pages left in this. Naturally, this being like a more somewhat academic non-fiction history book, it's a slower read for me than like a novel is, but I will probably finish this before I finish I Feed Her to the Beast. And yeah, it just continues to be interesting. I'm not sure what else to say on that matter. There's a lot of information in here. Like, I feel like I can't even summarize it because there's like a lot covered. Most recently I read a few chapters which were on kind of attitudes towards sex between those of different faiths, so between those from different religions, and actually all of the criminal punishments that could be part of marrying or having sex with someone of a different faith from you, which was not aware of because this is not my like area of expertise or period of expertise. So yeah, that was kind of terrifying, but gonna carry on reading both of those and update you later. Is legitimately giving me anxiety in the best kind of possible way because I'm invested naturally, but my stomach is twisting thinking what is going to happen, how is this book going to pan out, because the protagonist is a sympathetic protagonist. She's somebody that you empathise with and can understand, and you sort of go through all her roiling insecurities and really just feel for her, but also what she's got in herself in for unwittingly, but also now how those insecurities are sort of bubbling to the surface and how that's all sort of impacting the world around her. And like I said, there's some sort of like dark magic I don't want to give too much away about, but
how much of it's influencing her, how much is she influencing it, how far is it all going to go, essentially, like how far is she going to descend. Now, I'm not obviously going to give anything away when I get to the end of this book, but it's actually really enjoyable because it's not about like a perfect protagonist, but it's about somebody who does things that make you cringe and wish she would act differently, but also somebody who you can sort of understand because you get to see inside her head and kind of the pressures around her and everything she has to face on a daily basis. So I think that's what makes it so enjoyable. It's actually really nice to have a protagonist like that. I don't know how it's going to pan out, but I think it could go either way and I'd still really enjoy it. Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking.
Fun fact, I just fell down the stairs whilst carrying a box of books. Genuinely dangerous to be a reader, but in all seriousness, I'm icing my foot because I bent my toes backwards a little bit. So no more moving and packing stuff for me today. I don't even know what to say. It's really not the end of the world, but like, it's just typical. I have, however, finished the last 2 books I was reading for this vlog, so I thought I would tell you about them. So first up, I Feed Her to the Beast, and the Beast is Me. Loved it. Fantastic book. Such a difficult book to talk about in any detail though, because I don't want to spoil anything. It's one of those books where I actually knew very, very little going into it. It's the kind of book that has a fantastically vague blurb. So I don't want to say too much. I think I feel comfortable now saying there are some little allusions to Greek mythology, which you do not need to know about Greek mythology in any way to read this book, but like if you are into Greek mythology, then you'll be like, huh, fun. But yeah, it was a fantastic book, full of the sort of like stresses of hierarchy and elitism in the arts and pressure and loneliness and judgment, and it was beautiful and horrific and so many things all in one go, and I loved it. I think if you liked Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand, which is another YA horror novel, you'll enjoy this, but it's very different and very unique. I just think, like, you know, if you like that, you might like this, but it's well worth picking up because it's full of interesting moral conundrums and it keeps you on your toes, and particularly that last third I could not put down. I was like, where's this going? What's going to happen? Come on, Laurence, I need to know. And I really enjoyed our protagonist. For all, I sometimes just wanted to go, why? And other times I went, yeah, I kind of get it and I understand. So really enjoyed it. And then Fires of Lust, again, also enjoyed it. I mean, it's hard when talking about something like that's a little bit more dense non-fiction, because I enjoyed it. I learned things from it. It had tons of information. How could I not enjoy that? I found it very readable, although I definitely say it's denser than maybe your typical sort of like pop history, sort of general audience history book that you might pick up not having read about a subject ever before. I think having a little bit of medieval history context will definitely help, but I don't think it's necessary to read this book, and I don't think it's anywhere near as like almost impenetrable as some academic books, which is a thing, unfortunately. So it's a nice like kind of in between those two, and very well researched and very comprehensive. But yeah, I did it. Managed to get all my books finished before I move, which I'm really happy about. I feel like I can start fresh and new in a few days in my new home, which I'm really excited about. And I'm also taking the week off work, so I think that's going to be just like really refreshing new start for me. Yeah, big changes ahead. Thanks for coming along on this little reading vlog leading up to them and listening to me ramble about the books I've been reading. I hope you enjoyed it. But yeah, I'd love to know if you've read any of these books, what you thought about them. We can talk about them in the comments down below. That would be lovely. And until next time, happy reading everyone, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.